The Washington Commanders are bringing the number one rushing offense in the NFL, along with some third down problems, into Monday night against an unpredictable Chicago Bears team. Covering all of that right now on Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This is Crossover Thursday. It's a Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bears. I'm David Harrison, host of Locked On Commanders, covering the team for WSA 9, right here with all of you 5 days a week. He is Lauren Cox, host of Locked On Bears, doing the same thing over at that great channel. You can find me on X at DHarrison82. You can find Lauren at Cox Sports 1. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bears your first listen or your view today. And a special thank you goes out to all of the everydayers for both shows. Those of you who come through for every single episode, a special thank you for making this one another part of your watching schedule. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to go over the keys to victory for both sides of this week's Monday Night Football matchup. We're going to break down the individual matchups. But first, we're going to get into the biggest storylines facing each team in Week 6. All of that coming up on today's Crossover Thursday episode, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and all thanks to PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Jaden Daniels returned to the lineup for Washington last week, has the Commanders feeling confident, but the team's glaring weakness is on third down, even on a pretty effective offense. Brutal test, potentially, over a turnover-hungry Bears team that defensively, Lauren, seems to live and die on big plays.
Yeah, that's kind of been their story. Like, they're not a great defense by any means, but they've just kind of scrapped and clawed and found ways to get the job done. Like when they played the Las Vegas Raiders before their bye week, it was a weird game where they had like 3 or 4 turnovers in there, but the Raiders only punted once all game. Like every drive was either points or a turnover, and only when they were like backed up in their own end zone did they end up really kind of punting the ball in there. So it was just kind of a tricky situation of like, if you can take care of the football, especially I think with the Commanders' number 1 ranked rushing offense against a really struggling Bears run defense that I know we'll talk about more as this episode goes on, I think they don't have to go big here. You can kind of game manage your way to a victory and wait for this defense to make some mistakes.
Yeah, and I think that's really got to be kind of the game plan here, right? I think the question, however, from the Commander side, when it comes to that is Cliff Kingsbury kind of finally aware that his team, his offense is a rush first offense? You know, Cliff Kingsbury comes from the classic air raid, family tree and all that stuff. And Locked On Commanders fans have heard me talk ad nauseum about how air raid isn't actually just about throwing the ball down the field. It's about using the entirety of the field, which includes, of course, the backfield and the short area of the field as well. But, Cliff's brand of air raid certainly is a little bit deeper and likes to take those shots. We saw against the Los Angeles Chargers, he came out trying to go pass heavy, right? 2 of the first 3 plays of the game were passes, and that third play was a quarterback run. So he was very happy to have Jaden Daniels back. Now, fortunately for the Commanders, he did eventually move into the run game. He did end up leveraging that run, over 140 yards rushing for 3 out of the first 5 weeks. Twice they've run for over 200 yards. And this feels like a game that if Cliff comes out kind of understanding that and don't take the run away for the Chicago Bears and make them take it away themselves, then potentially they can have some of that similar success. But I know the Bears are also getting some help back. So what are they getting back this weekend, Lauren, and how could that maybe change some things?
Yeah, that's definitely kind of the big storyline right now is like getting healthier, but then like how much of a difference will that actually make? The big returns are slot cornerback Kyler Gordon, who we're kind of wondering, they've talked a lot this offseason about moving him around and not just keeping him in the slot. So we wonder, first game back, do they just put him in the slot and say, hey, let's start back where you were supposed to start before we get crazy? Or do they say, hey, well, the Commanders don't have any tape on us using you differently, so let's throw you all over the place in your first game back? That's one of the big question marks there. And then linebacker TJ Edwards. Both of these guys have missed most of the beginning of the season so far. It's been an impact in the run defense for sure when you're missing a linebacker and a slot cornerback who plays up near the line of scrimmage a lot and is a really key factor in that area. But it sounds like potentially still going to be missing somebody like Grady Jarrett on the interior of the defensive line, which is going to be a challenge there. And certainly some other players on offense that could also pose their own challenges here. But I'm very worried about the Bears giving up the league high 6.1 yards per carry and the Commanders gaining the league high 5.9 yards per carry. This is the, very movable object against the very stoppable, or the unstoppable force against the very movable object.
I like the way you put that. Yeah, I mean, that number one rushing attack is producing 156.4 yards per game. I mean, that includes a week 2 performance from the Commanders offense where they only ran the ball on design plays 13 times. And, there's season production. The average per game could actually be better had the Commanders try to run the ball a little bit more in that game. And in the red zone, they're scoring every time down, not touchdowns every time. 10 of 14 possessions in the red zone have produced touchdowns. The other 4 have produced field goals, but no turnovers on downs, no turnovers in general. So that's smart football. Because, I was watching that Raiders game on the way back from Los Angeles, and I just came away. And it's only one game, right? So it's very dangerous to try to make any sweeping judgments. But from that one game, their last game on the field, I'm like, man, if the Commanders play their usually smart brand of football, protect the football, don't throw interceptions, don't fumble it, things like that, then they're probably going to have a really good chance of winning this game. But third down is the failure point for the Washington Commanders. If the Chicago Bears have a chance here, that's where it's going to come. 29th in the NFL right now, Lauren, 32.7% conversion rate. 33% is the floor, right? Like 33% is you're doing bare minimum, and they're below that. I talked to Dan Quinn on Wednesday about how you had the number one rushing attack, yet you had one of the worst third down conversion rates. He talked about discipline and how the penalties are, they're getting maybe 6 yards on first down, maybe 2 yards on second down, then they get a penalty and it sets them back anyway. So they got all those rushing yards, but they're still in third and, manageable, but obviously not desirable. Where's the Bears defense been on third down so far? And what do you think their chances are of continuing that trend for the Washington Commanders offense?
Yeah, it hasn't been like particularly stellar or locked down, but I am interested in the battle of the penalties here too. Like the Bears have not been great on third down by any means because they give up these big chunk runs on first and second down, and then it becomes third and manageable. And it's sort of this bend, don't break, hope you get a turnover on them before they get all the way down in the red zone or in the end zone. But the Bears have had plenty of penalties on them on both sides of the ball as well. And I think I saw we got a refereeing crew that leads the league in penalties handed out this year so far through the first 5 weeks. So it's going to be a battle of like who can get out of their own way in some of these situations and who can play the smarter, more disciplined brand of football. And I think a lot of Bears fans are pinning hopes on, hey, at the bye week, they're going to have an extra week here now that they figured some of that stuff out. They've gotten the timing and the discipline and the communication better to avoid those penalties. Because I think if you picked up the Bears team that just played against the Raiders and then instantly went right in the Commanders game and did the same thing, I think they're losing that game. But if the bye week is enough to figure some things out and get a little bit healthier, like that's really what they're pinning their hopes on to be able to pull off an upset here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the Washington Commanders side of this thing, you look at the discipline, you look at some of those things. 13-play, 99-yard game-sealing touchdown drive in Week 5 against the Los Angeles Chargers. That's got to give you a lot of confidence coming into this week. That's the last time we saw this offense on the field was doing that kind of thing. So if you can take that into this weekend, obviously it gives you a really good opportunity. And you know what, Lauren, we made it over 8 minutes in this Crossover Thursday episode, and the words Hail and Mary have not come out of our mouths because the truth of the matter is, and I agree with quarterback Jaden Daniels, who of course was asked about it. There's no dig on anybody. It has to be asked about. It has to be talked about. But he said that Hail Mary last year is not going to do anything for us this year. And he said it a little bit more direct than I did, but this is a family show, so we're going to put it that way. These are the big storylines that are impacting the 2025 Bears and Commanders. So that's why we're talking about those and not last year's highlights. So those storylines are going to help shape their narrative, but the game is ultimately going to be decided by the individual players on the field. We'll dive into those matchups coming up next on this Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's Crossover Thursday episode brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. We talk a lot on these shows about what separates good teams from great teams. And oftentimes it comes down to the details, from footwork to your breathing. Athletes sweat all the details, coaches sweat all the details, and Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every model of their vehicle line. You really feel that dedication when you get behind the wheel of a Mazda vehicle. It's the little things that make the huge difference. The intention is obvious in the Japanese craftsmanship. You can feel it in every detail, from the sleek metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery. It makes your cabin feel like a premium space. And Mazda designs their vehicles to make everyday drives feel like anything but routine, with smooth handling that connects you to the road, intuitive controls that make you feel like you're exactly where you should be. Even a trip to the grocery store becomes a little bit more of an experience. All of that built on a foundation of confidence. Like the players, they sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. With Mazda, move and be moved. beyond the quarterback duel, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, we know that's going to be a storyline. Obviously, it's going to be a storyline, but you also have the coaching strategies. You still have the one-on-one matchups everywhere else. It's 22 guys on the field at any given time. Hopefully, right? Hopefully you don't leave a guy on the sideline, but that does happen from time to time, or bring an extra guy onto the field. Anyway, let's dive into the matchups that are going to really define this contest. Lauren, from the Bears' perspective, where's their key kind of strength on weakness, or maybe weakness on strength that you think they have to shore up this weekend or Monday night in order to get a win?
Yeah, I think the biggest individual spot Bears fans are going to be watching the closest is on the offensive line. And really, it's both offensive tackles, because this week will be the first career start at left tackle for Theo Benedett, taking over for Braxton Jones. Benedett was an undrafted free agent last year, spent the year on injured reserve, kind of was an odd man out of a left tackle battle, and then eventually worked his way in. And now he's taken over as the starter, and he's plan A here. He's showed a lot to be encouraged about, but not anybody with any kind of proven track record of success or reliability so far up to this point in his career. And then Darnell Wright got injured against the Raiders, and we don't have an official injury report yet as we're recording this on Wednesday night, but like he was been limited. He missed a lot of practice and was kind of working off to the side on Wednesday at practice. So it's unclear if he's going to be able to go. And if he's not, it's rookie second round pick Ozzie Trapillo's first career start at right tackle. So you could have two brand new starting offensive tackles. And I'm particularly worried about Dorance Armstrong on really on either side whenever they rotate him around. The rest of the the rest of the Commanders pass rush doesn't scare me as much because he's the big sack getter, but it doesn't really matter. Both tackles are going to be vulnerable spots. When I already had some concerns about the interior, the center and right guard haven't been quite as good as the Bears have needed either, and it all just leaves you worried. But Caleb Williams has done a better job under pressure this year and not taking sacks and not holding it too long, but it's a little different when you got a rookie and a first-time starter at both tackle spots.
Yeah, Dorance Armstrong, man, I mean, I think that's definitely going to be a key to this game. So entering week 4, a couple weeks ago, he was on a sack per game rate, literally 1 sack in week 1, 2, and 3. Was looking to be the first Commander to have sacks in 4 straight games since Preston Smith, who interestingly is back with the team now, working on his role as well. Was shut out by the Atlanta Falcons, got no sacks in that game, comes back in week 5 and doesn't just get 1, he gets 2. So he's back on that sack per game average, on pace to have 17 sacks, well above his career high of 8.5 sacks. He's already matched the amount of sacks he had with the Commanders last season. And the big story around Dorance Armstrong in 2024, Lauren, was the fact that he was getting a lot of pressure, getting a lot of penetration, and just not finishing. This year, he's finishing. And yeah, I mean, you're putting up against a guy he's got the hot hand. You kind of slipped up there and said Broncos. I think maybe Von Miller was creeping into the conversation. Okay. Von Miller, when he got into Washington, he said, look, it's my job to come on the court and shoot threes. And that means get after the quarterback. He said he could roll out of bed, throw on slippers, and rush the quarterback in his sleep. So that's what he's going to look to do as well. Those are going to be incredibly key matchups because you're going to get it from both sides. And, by the way, they still have Frankie Luvu, who hasn't really gotten loose a whole lot this season, but certainly still has that ability. Lauren, and key matchup.
Let's not forget Chicago Bears legend Jacob Martin on that defensive line.
Oh yes.
Big time.
Jacob Martin's been a lot of fun. Yeah, Jacob Martin's been a lot of fun. I don't know how Bears fans feel about him, but man, he's been a lot of fun, and his Instagram game is spectacular. I've had a lot of fun following his Instagram traffic. If you haven't done it, do that.
I think it's frustrating for Bears fans because when he was here, he was essentially a nobody who couldn't really get on the field and produce. And now they're sitting there looking for anything they could possibly get at pass rusher because Montez Sweat's had a slow start to the season. And this free agent they signed, Dio Dengbo, slow start of the season. They're desperate for pass rush. And one of the guys they let walk to the Commanders is having a pretty good start to the season for him.
He is, man. I don't know. Maybe it's the DMV cooking out here. I mean, Chicago's got pretty good food too. We can talk about food on a whole other crossover episode. We do crossover Chicago and DMV food if we wanted to. But Lauren, we've already kind of touched on it a little bit, so I don't want to dive too deep into it. But the rush offense against the run defense, you mentioned it already. Bears 31st against the run. That's kind of their Achilles heel, I think. It's not just yards per game, like teams are rushing all over them because they're leading. It's also yards per carry, over 6 yards per carry. I'm starting Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt in my fantasy league. I highly recommend if you have him on your fantasy team, you probably do the same thing. But the other one is going to be that Washington Commanders pass rush, but it's not just on the edge. The interior has actually been causing a lot of problems as well. Daron Payne is playing like he's in a contract year. He's not. He's actually under contract next year, but to a certain extent, he kind of is in a contract year because the Commanders could cut him this offseason for literally next to nothing in dead cap. So it's kind of like a contract year, right? And Javon Kinlaw, I'm kind of loving it, Lauren, because I saw all the national talking heads and all the national headlines about how overpaid Javon Kinlaw's contract was and how ridiculous the contract was for Adam Peters to give out. Meanwhile, all the local guys were all saying, hey guys, like slow the heck down. Here's where he fits. Here's how he fits. Talk to him in his introductory press conference. Says you're not getting the Jets Javon Kinlaw, because I'll say it for him. He won't say this, but they asked him to do some crazy stuff that's outside of his skill set. Now he's being asked to be himself, and it's working beautifully. So as those edge rushers are getting home, it's the interior pass rush that's kind of helping them. And I feel like with Caleb Williams, correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, but I see a little bit of the 68 sacks he took his rookie season, the 6 sacks he took early in this season. I kind of see that cumulative pressure still kind of impacting him, even in moments when he's got a clean pocket.
Yeah, I think there have still been times when he'll leave a clean pocket sooner, but there has been a lot of progress in terms of getting rid of the ball and not holding on to it too long and dragging these plays out and then getting sacked at the very end. Like, he's been a lot more decisive in gripping it and ripping it, or getting the heck out of the pocket and throwing it away or scrambling. Like, he's not trying to wait for the perfect play, and then it never shows up. He's done a lot better of a job of avoiding sacks and not letting pressure become sacks that end up kind of being the quarterback's fault, even if the lineman got beat early in the play. Like, so it's been a balance he's trying to strike, but it does feel like progress, but certainly not anything that's been perfected yet.
Yeah, and I do know that sack rate so far has been cut in half from last season's rate to so far this season. Overall has been cut in half. So I think certainly, obviously, there's at least some sort of improvement from an execution standpoint. So obviously that's promising for Chicago Bears fans and for the Chicago Bears themselves. What's not promising, however, Lauren, is Deebo Samuel, right? Deebo Samuel. I'm not going to put it as this bluntly. One of my peers out here kind of said he's basically the only receiver on the field right now, with Terry McLaurin still on the mend, that opposing defenses have to worry about. I would disagree with that. Dan Quinn disagreed with that, but I would say that he is certainly the most dangerous receiver. Noah Brown potentially could return. Terry McLaurin is still up in the air, though he didn't practice Wednesday, so I'm not sure how confident I am that he is going to play. But either way, Deebo's going to be out there. And even while he's had multiple weeks now where he is the most dangerous receiver on the field, he's still got 30 catches, 300 receiving yards, well on his way to making my projection of 1,200 offensive yards and 6 touchdowns a reality. Lauren, how do the Bears become the first team, even if Terry's not on the field, to really stop Deebo Samuel this season?
Yeah, that's where the Kyler Gordon conversation becomes interesting to me, because, you know, this could be the kind of situation where, yeah, when Deebo's in the slot, Kyler Gordon follows him in the slot and plays his slot cornerback role. But this would be the great game to, when they move Deebo outside, maybe you have Kyler Gordon follow him outside and kind of dabble in it without fully changing Kyler Gordon's position. Because I think, you know, he's a guy who, if he's truly 100%, which I guess we don't know exactly how close to that he is coming off of the injury, but he can hang with Deebo Samuel. The Bears feel really confident in him as one of the better slot cornerbacks in the league. And I will say, the villain of last year's Bears-Commanders game, Tyreek Stevenson on the Hail Mary play, he has had 2 really good games his last couple of games. And it felt like after week 2, some kind of switch flipped in him, and that he's been more comfortable, more confident, more just instinctual and not thinking so much and just playing. And we're all really curious to see, like, was that just, you know, a bad Raiders team and a Cowboys offense that lost CeeDee Lamb in the middle of that game, so maybe it just was a good matchup for him, or has he actually turned a real corner? And I think there's a growing confidence that, yeah, you know, if Deebo's match up with him one-on-one, you're not panicking. You're panicking a little bit more if he's going up against any of the other Bears corners, because they've had a bunch of injuries there. It'll be Nashawn Wright as the other outside cornerback, or if Gordon plays some on the outside, they'll bring in Nick McLeod in the slot. Both those guys are like backup type players that are supposed to be special teams guys that the Bears have had to rely on more and more. And, you know, ideally you wouldn't want them out there, but with Jalen Johnson out for most of the season, they're going to have to roll with at least one of them, and we'll see which one they kind of prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Tyreek Stevenson, because I was actually talking to another media member today, and I said, look, like, you know, overall his season has actually been getting a lot better. I think he's playing a lot better, like you said. And I think he's the guy with the most pressure on him coming into Monday night. Like, I know we're going to have Caleb versus Jaden, Ben Johnson versus, you know, Joey Jr. Really, it's going to be Ben Johnson versus Cliff Kingsbury, even though their units don't play each other. And of course, people are here talking about how Ben Johnson made the Commanders turn their plane around mid-flight to Detroit because he said he wasn't going to interview, all that kind of stuff. But really, I mean, I think Tyreek is the guy that's got the bullseye on him. I know Commanders fans are going to be looking for the matchups against him. And I'll tell you, man, I mean, his reputation precedes him. I knew this last year as well, but obviously it's still, you know, built a little bit. But I said it on the record publicly, so I'll say it here too. I think if I'm Cliff Kingsbury, I'm hitting him with a hitch. I'm hitting him with the slant. I'm hitting him with the speed out, because you know he likes to be aggressive. and then I'm hitting him with the double move, see if I can give him to bite on that first move after a couple of short routes and see if I can't burn him. And, Commanders fans would love to see Tyreek Stevenson getting burned in Northwest Stadium. Of course, matchups are one thing. Execution is a whole other. And the team that wins on Monday night may simply be the one that just better executes their game plan and avoids costly mistakes. So we'll dive into what it's going to take for each team coming up next on this Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bears, Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you in part by Gametime. The NFL season is rolling, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans, hearing them cheer on their favorite teams. But let's be honest, getting tickets sometimes can be a little bit of a hassle. That's why I use Gametime for any sporting event, theater, any type of event that I want to go to in my area. They don't just have good deals. They just do what it takes to not take advantage of fans trying to get to games. You're always going to get 100% authentic tickets. They're going to be delivered on time, and you're going to get them at the best price. Plus, you turn on the all fees and included toggle switch on the app, and you get all the prices up front, so there's no surprises at checkout. When you go looking for tickets to this Commanders-Bears game this weekend, the app is going to make it super simple, and you can see the exact view from your seats before you purchase it, which obviously gives you a lot of peace of mind of what you're getting into. So download the Gametime app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, the promo code is LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers, you can bet just $5. You'll get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That deal has been on the table since the beginning of the season. Here we are into October, and still, new customers, if you still haven't jumped in, $5, win that bet. You get $300 to play with however you want, wherever you want, and it's a lot of fun to do it. I love FanDuel because of all the different ways you get to play. Locked On Commanders everydayers know that I'm a big same game parlay guy. I love building those parlays. Truthfully, I get a little bit extra on them, and I don't win a lot of them because of it, but it's fun, man. I like to take risks. I like to go big on some of these things, like Dorrance Armstrong. Maybe he's going to get another sack. Maybe he's going to combine that with the Commanders covering the spread. That's a little bit of a simpler parlay, a little bit lighter than what I usually do, but there's a lot of options. So whatever it is you're into, don't wait anymore. Visit FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app today, and get started. Monday Night Football, Week 6 of the 2025 NFL season. Chicago Bears visiting the Washington Commanders. So many times, Lauren, the Commanders and Bears have played now in consecutive seasons that they almost might just become rivals. And I'll tell you what, the Commanders play the NFC North. The Bears obviously play the NFC East. Same position finisher. So we need the Commanders and Bears to finish in the same spot. And maybe we can run this back for Caleb and Jaden part 3. And if there's an exciting ending to this one, then the NFL audiences may be calling for it. I don't know if there's going to be a Hail Mary again, but that'd be something. I don't know what would happen if there was another Hail Mary win, especially if it was in favor of the Commanders. That would be a Bears fan's nightmare. But even the Bears came back with one. I mean, how do you not try to run that back for a third season? But Lauren, outside of the Hail Mary opportunity potentially, how do the Bears get a win this weekend?
Yeah, I think the way it looks is a healthier Bears team cleans up a lot of the little mistakes. A big part of why they haven't been able to run the ball, I guess it's twofold. Is one that they haven't held up well, especially on the interior of the trenches, and then the linebackers behind them have not done a good job hitting the right gaps and finishing. That Jermaine Edmonds has not been particularly great in the running game, not overrunning runs sometimes, or not quite getting the gap he needs to. And then, the other linebacker, Noah Sewell, leads the NFL in missed tackles, or did entering the bye week, I should say. So they can get to the ball carrier sometimes, but then not wrap up, and it becomes a challenge. So, you get TJ Edwards and Kyler Gordon back in there. You stop the run a little bit better. The Commanders have a few penalties and get some of these longer down and distance situations. And then you get the opportune turnover here that gives the Bears offense a couple of extra chances with the ball. And I think there's enough confidence in Chicago that not that the Bears are going to put up 35 points on this Commanders defense, but that they can hold their own. They can get to, 20 or 24 or whatever they might be, that if the defense can just hold them under a reasonable threshold there, that the Bears can still be able to win this game, because I think they can trust that even if there's some pass rush concerns from the Commander side, like attacking the Bears offensive line, they found ways to get done against Max Crosby when pass rush was a big deal. They found ways to get done against Brian Flores' blitzing Vikings defense. They can overcome some of the offensive line issues, which feels weird to say covering the Chicago Bears because they have not been able to do that consistently in their history. But somehow the defense has become the bigger question mark in a game like this, and it's all about health right now. And then Jaquan Brisker's on the injury report all of a sudden. So if he's not able to go, and if some of the other guys aren't able to go, that's when it all starts crumbling down.
Yeah, Jaquan Brisker would be really big. He's the guy that I would not be upset if Adam Peters found a way to trade for at some point. Not obviously this season. I don't think he's entering the last year of his rookie contract right now. And if the injuries are a thing, they're probably gonna let him walk in free agency. So that's definitely not out of the question that he's available this offseason. Definitely been a big fan of his game since he came out of Penn State. So for the Washington Commanders, we've talked about the ground game. Obviously, you got to keep that rolling. Stay ahead of the chains. That means get the ground game rolling, but also be more disciplined. Don't get those penalties. Surprisingly enough, actually, the Commanders have a plus 25 margin. Like opponents have 25 more yards this season in penalty yards, and that did not start that way. That started much more in the negatives for the Commanders. So they have gotten better, but instead of quantity, the quality or the lack of quality or the negative quality of some of those penalties, the negative impact they've had have been very, very substantial. So that's going to be something to watch. And then I think you got to force Caleb Williams into mistakes, right? Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, what they have in common besides their draft class and their draft positions is the fact they're both young quarterbacks. And everybody knows a young quarterback, especially one that's incredibly competitive, with both of these guys are incredibly competitive. Caleb wears it on his sleeves. I think people tend to think he's a little bit more competitive than maybe some other guys, while Jaden is running around the field smiling and laughing at pass rushers as they're chasing him, things like that. But trust me, Jaden is just as competitive as anybody else is going to be in any of these locker rooms. And young competitive quarterbacks, when they're falling behind or when they're trailing and it's getting into crunch time and the possessions are starting to thin, we know what they do, Lauren. They put the ball up and they put the ball into space. I'll tell you right now, I've picked up Quan Martin in my fantasy league. We play with individual defensive players. We get one each. I picked up Quan Martin this week because if the Commanders can do what I think they can do early in this game, then I think they can put Caleb in a position where he's going to put the ball up, and that roaming free safety might have an opportunity to grab a pick or two for me in this game. But of course, you have to get started, right? The Commanders have had struggles starting fast, offense and defense. They gave up 10 points in the first two possessions to the Los Angeles Chargers. A lot of people are not talking about that from last week because the final score is 27-10. But if the Cleveland Browns, if the Chicago Bears, I'm sorry, Bears fans, I did not mean that. If the Chicago Bears can get those 10 points like the Chargers did, the key for them obviously would be to not relinquish that control the way that the Chargers did and to not let the Commanders take all that control. So we'll see. But I think that's going to be, beyond the two things that we've already talked about a little bit in depth. Again, the ground game, the penalties, forcing Caleb Williams into mistakes by getting an early lead, maintaining that lead, putting him in a position where he feels like he's got to make a play or else it's just not going to work out. I think that's going to be the best thing for the Washington Commanders.
I will say, when it comes to Caleb Williams' decision-making and turnovers, he generally hasn't had, I want to say maybe there haven't been any of those like super bonehead, like, oh, why did you try and force that ball into there? I mean, there was like one throw across his body, but anyway, a little bit nitpicky as to how bad of a decision it was. But like the turnover-worthy throws he has made have been more like, he sees it and he rushes it and then he doesn't step into it fully. And it's a little overthrown, a little underthrown. Like it's more an accuracy thing than like a terrible decision. But still, it's still situation wise. Like, yeah, you're behind, you're pressing, you're trying to do a little bit too much and you see the throw and you just want to rip it and throw it in there. Like that's when he can get into some trouble there with the turnovers. Not so much like, oh, I'm going to try a risky ball that I'm going to, throw into triple coverage, but it's more like it would have been an accurate throw would have been a good decision, but the inaccurate throw is what made it a bad decision there. And one last thing I want to ask you about with the Commanders running game in particular, how much of that is the running backs and Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt or Bill or whatever they're calling him now? Like how much of it is these backs are doing a really good job of making guys getting yards after contact? And how much of it is like this Commanders offensive line is run blocking really well and just bulldozing, controlling the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, I think there's certainly an element of the running backs kind of, creating yards and finding space to run and all that stuff. Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt, if you haven't watched him play yet, and you watch him for the first time on Monday night, you're going to see really good vision and really good ability to cut through a hole and not lose any of his speed. It's kind of amazing to me to see it in person where he just doesn't lose even a millisecond of speed off of his run while he's cutting through a hole and making an adjustment. It's amazing. But the offensive line has certainly done their part and opened up holes and done not just the offensive line, like just the blocking scheme in general. Luke McCaffrey will come through a hole and clear out a linebacker. do things like that. That kid is just reckless with his body and just throwing it all over the place. But I think something, and I'm glad you mentioned this actually, because it was in my notes, but I couldn't get to it earlier. Trent Scott as an eligible lineman, extra lineman. Really, it was kind of something that was born out of necessity. We did see it sometimes last year, but John Bates, best blocking tight end in the NFL, if you ask any Commanders fan, was injured, missed a couple of games. So to adjust to that, they started using Trent Scott as an eligible lineman a lot, like not just here and there. I mean, very, very consistently. You're going to hear, Trent Scott's number be called as an eligible lineman, or an eligible receiver a lot on Monday night, I think. And it's kind of just become part of the offense now because it's been so successful. So you're going to see that sixth lineman, but then you're also going to see John Bates out there, or you're going to see Benson out there too, very effective blocking tight ends. And you may end up with 6 or 7 capable blockers on the offensive line that they could also pass out of that look, right? So you can't just sell out on the run and say, okay, we're just going to go crazy here, because they could also pass to John Bates, an underrated receiver, Ben Sinnott, who hasn't really established himself as a receiver, but we believe he has that ability. And then, of course, Deebo Samuel's a short area target, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really given Cliff a little bit of a dynamic that, again, goes against the traditional air raid, what you think of him when you think of offense, but it's also been incredibly effective. And Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt, I mean, again, 111 yards rushing on 14 carries. Yeah, you want to give Bill all the credit in the world, but if you watch football, that there's a lot that's going on in the blocking scheme as well that's allowing that to happen. For Bears fans who don't know, yes, his name is Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt. We call him Bill because as a kid, he had no hair, and everybody called him Lil Bill after the cartoon character, and it just kind of stuck. So that's what we call him out here in these parts is Bill. That's where that comes from. I know some people are confused of how he's Ja'Cory and you call him Bill. That's why.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about that, so I'm glad you snuck it in there. And yeah, the whole multi-tight end thing, that was sort of supposed to be the blueprint for the Bears offense with Cole Kmet and Colson Loveland, but then Loveland got hurt, and it was slow getting him up to speed in the offense. But if they're both healthy, they're going to try and do more of that on Monday for sure.
Yeah, it can be very effective. So that's going to do it for this week's Crossover Thursday episode, everybody. As always, you can find myself on X at DHarrison82. You can find Lauren at Cox Sports 1. Of course, make sure you're following both Locked On Bears and Locked On Commanders on YouTube, wherever you're listening to this podcast. The NFL season is up and rolling. You can get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast every single day. Tyler Rowland giving you that morning shot of NFL energy. Tony Wiggins bringing you into the barbershop for a little bit of a calmer conversation, but also very good conversation. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To all of our everydayers, we appreciate you. We see you, and we thank you for coming through again this time. Until next time, everybody else, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll see you again real soon. For Lauren Cox, I'm David Harrison. This has been Locked On Commanders, Locked On Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.